boxing doubleheader is not only a showcase for two of the greatest champions in the sport, but also a live panel discussion and a charity event. A one-of-a-kind night on World Championship Boxing. Hello again, everybody. I'm Jim Lampley. Welcome to what will be one of our most unusual editions ever of World Championship Boxing. Not because of the two showcase fights in which both Ike Quartey and Roy Jones will try to stay undefeated against terrific contenders, and not just because of the panel discussion with Roy Jones live about his status, if you agree or if you disagree, as possibly the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. That's not the only reason this is unusual. You see, tonight is being called the Charity Bash. You hear a lot about the bad things that happen in boxing, but tonight, Roy Jones, with discretionary power over the live gate here in the theater at Madison Square Garden, has decreed that all of that gate, minus the promotion's expenses, will go to 4 charitable organizations, 2 police support groups here in New York City, the Congress of Racial Equality, and the debilitated former middleweight champion and friend to Jones, Gerald McClellan. Roy Jones seeing to it that tonight it isn't all bad news from boxing, but some very good news from here in the Garden. Preceding all that, a live panel discussion which we have set up among 3 journalists, Jones, and some of the spectators in the audience about Jones's defense of his title as perhaps the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. Here now a tape piece that sets up the parameters of the upcoming discussion. It's a pretty straightforward case. When Roy Jones demolished James Toney in their long-anticipated matchup 2 years ago, he vaulted, in the eyes of most ring experts, to the rank of best pound-for-pound fighter in the world.
I thought that Toney was hurt a couple of times during the fight, Larry. Not seriously, but hurt.
How about now? How about right now?
Champion of the world, Roy Jones Jr.
Certainly Jones has done nothing in the ring to tarnish the honor, as 5 subsequent knockout wins have brought his career record to 32-0, 28 knockouts, a knockout percentage of 87%. Combine the numbers with Jones's incomparable physique and fluid style, and the fighter's most ardent admirers don't hesitate to compare him to Sugar Ray Robinson or Muhammad Ali. But Roy Jones has critics too. Critics who say those comparisons won't be valid until Jones fights better opponents. You can pin this, if you choose, on the unfortunate circumstance that the whole middleweight to light heavyweight landscape is, for the moment, pretty nondescript, largely devoid of opponents to fuel the grand events that Jones's talent deserves.
That's it.
But you might just as easily point out that there are named fighters around. Fighters like Bernard Hopkins, Virgil Hill, seen here, and Henry Maska, for instance. In the past, Jones had seemed to be pricing himself out of the market to fight them, but recently, they are avoiding him. Whatever the reason, Jones isn't fighting fights the public is anxious to see. Instead, Jones has sought out newer and safer challenges for himself. In his last bout against Eric Lucas, Jones played a basketball game that morning, becoming the first ever to box professionally and play pro basketball on the same day. This summer, he'd been discussing the possibility of taking on 2 fighters in the same day, but that now has gone by the wayside. Tonight, we'll get a chance to find out what Jones is really thinking. All right, now welcome back live to the theater in Madison Square Garden. And for the benefit of all of you watching across the country, as well as those of you who are here in the theater, surely this is about to be one of the most unusual events ever to have preceded a doubleheader of championship boxing matches, as we get ready to introduce a live panel discussion among journalists chosen by us here at HBO and the super middleweight champion of the world, Roy Jones. I feel particularly skittish about introducing this kind of talk segment in front of one of tonight's guests in the audience, Geraldo Rivera, who's seated just out there beyond the ring. Geraldo, you want to come in here and help us out with this? Yep, he's busy with other ideas. Okay, let's quickly meet the people who will be involved in the panel discussion. As we mentioned, seated in the middle of the ring is the 168-pound world champion, regarded by many experts as the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport, Roy Jones Jr. And And here on the stage, ready to direct questions at Roy, our three chosen panelists. From the left, Steve Farhood, editor-in-chief of Ring Magazine, the longtime Bible of the sport. In the middle, Tony Paige, president of the Boxing Writers Association of America and boxing commentator for WFAN Radio here in New York. And on the far right, Ron Borges, boxing columnist for the Boston Globe. And let's start the discussion first with a question from you, Steve Farhood.
Thank you, Jim. Roy, you played professional basketball the afternoon of your last title defense against Eric Lucas. Do you not feel that that was both an insult to the challenger and to the sport of boxing?
No, I don't feel like it was an insult to anyone. I feel like it was simply God blessing me to be able to do some of the things that I really want to do in life. I had a great time doing it, and if I had to start all over and do it again, I would do the exact same thing. Thank you.
Tony Paige.
Roy, so many of your critics say you won't fight anybody with talent. Do you feel like the only way you'll get any respect is if you wind up in a wheelchair?
Well, critics are critics because they don't know what it's like to come in here and go face to face with this. They can stay critics. I think my talent would be greatly appreciated once I retire from the sport of boxing.
But seriously, Roy, is the subject of possible physical injury in the ring and possible debilitation, as has happened to your friend Gerald McClellan, something that occupies your mind when you consider which bouts to take?
It always occupies your mind. You have to make sure that once you come in here, you are well taken care of before you leave out of here. Because sometimes when you come in here, actually every time, you don't know if you're going to leave here walking or on a stretcher.
Thank you, Tony. Ron Borges, your question.
Roy, to get back to the issue of your opponents, you have been criticized by a lot of people about your opponents. It now appears that at least some of them are refusing to fight you, although the money's pretty good. Is it your fear that you will never get to face the opponent who can lift you to the level of Sugar Ray Leonard against Thomas Hearns?
No, that's not my fear, because we have an opponent here tonight by the name of Bryant Brannon who may be able to lift me to that. You never can tell.
All right, and now for one unusual wrinkle, a question for Roy Jones from a member of the audience.
Roy, due to the lack of quality competition in your weight class, would you consider fighting a heavyweight, and if so, who and when?
First of all, I don't look at it as a lack of competition in my weight class. I look at every man as having an equal chance once he steps in this square. Second of all, I would consider fighting a heavyweight, but the only heavyweight that I would have ever thought about really fighting probably would have been Michael Moore, since he's a heavyweight champion.
All right, let's go back to Steve Farhood of Ring Magazine. Steve?
Roy, James Toney has been calling for you almost since the day you beat him. He's put together a little bit of a winning streak. Is that a rematch that might materialize?
It may materialize, but first of all, he has to put together a win streak over guys that they don't have to pull out of coffins.
You satisfied with that, Steve?
Yeah, I am.
That's pretty direct. Tony Paige?
Roy, during this week, Russell Peltz, the promoter of Bryant Brannon, said a few things that you weren't great. They shouldn't be comparing you to Sugar Ray Robinson. You seem to get a little angry, and I'm wondering, I can either go home on an 11:45 bus or 12:45 bus. Which bus am I going home on tonight?
First of all, I don't underestimate nobody. This guy could come here tonight and give me the hardest fight of my career, so I can't tell you. However, if he makes a mistake, you can take that early one.
Roy has never lacked for confidence. Ron Borges?
Roy, you've said in the past in defense of yourself that none of these fighters would fight you. HBO has said that been critical of you at some times, but have recently said that you had come to them and said to make a fight against whomever and you would fight them. It now appears they're having the same problems getting guys to fight you that you had. Do you feel that there was a time when they didn't believe that you were as willing to fight these guys as you were, or at least didn't believe it was as difficult to get opponents?
It was a time that people did not believe that I was making the efforts to fight the better opponents. However, when these guys started hearing this criticism on me, they started thinking, well, maybe he is afraid, so let's challenge him. When I answered all the challenges, they said, oh, it's the same way we used to know. Let's leave him alone.
Roy, before we go to another question from the audience, can you specify just a few of the recent offers to potential opponents that have been turned down?
Nigel Benn, Steve Collins, Nordiello, Frank Lyles. Bernard Hopkins is the only one who's thinking about taking it now. That may and may not happen.
Every one of those fighters has been offered 7 figures or considerably more to fight you. Is that correct?
That's very correct.
And Frankie Lyles has never had a $1 million purse in his career, yet he, for the moment, turns it down. Is that right?
That's correct.
Let's have one more question from the audience.
Roy, like Jim said, you've been considered the most talented fighter in your class, but there's also been criticism that you're not as dedicated to boxing at times, basketball and whatnot. Do you feel bored by boxing? Do you feel that you're not challenged anymore in your weight class?
Sometimes you can feel bored by not having that rival that people see as an equal opposition. This can put you in a complacent mode. Has me sometimes to where I don't feel like I should be getting up and getting better every day. However, when I went to play basketball, I felt so far behind until it made me want to come back to boxing and see how much further I could go up. So that's why I did what I did.
All right, let's take one more question from Ring Magazine editor-in-chief Steve Farhood. Steve?
Roy, you're in Madison Square Garden. As New Yorkers know, this is the building in the whole world for professional basketball. If I gave you a choice, held a gun to your head, said you have a choice, playing point guard in this building in the NBA championships or fighting the fight of the decade in the Madison Square Garden ring, which one would you pick?
I see an owl in the red corner. Right there.
So that means it's all boxing from now on?
Most part.
Mostly boxing. Gentlemen, Steve, Tony, Ron, thanks very much for your time. We'd like to thank all of you in the audience for your cooperation. How about the champion, huh? He answers questions less than an hour before he fights. Let's turn it back over now to HBO boxing analyst Larry Merchant and tonight's expert commentator, filling in as he so regularly and so skillfully does for our George Foreman, the legendary Gil Clancy. Larry?
All right, thank you, Jim. Last time we were in the Garden, we had a precedent-setting fight riot on television. Now we have a precedent-setting interview before a fight. Have we created a monster here, Gil? How does an old-time fight guy like you respond to this exhibition?
It would never happen if I managed Bryant Brannon. It's putting Roy Jones in a superstar status with the judges and the referee of this fight looking on. I just think that I would never allow that to happen. You have to remember, this is a world championship fight, but when the bell rings, neither guy is a champion, and Brannon deserves equal respect.
Aside from the fact that everybody recognizes Roy as a superstar, no matter what happened here, couldn't his management team and Russell Peltz, his promoter, has said, look at this as, well, if he wants to distract himself from a fight that's going to take place within another hour, good luck to him.
Well, that could be their thinking, but it wouldn't be my thinking. He has a chance to really polarize these judges with his actions.
Did you hear anything in the interview that changed your mind about everybody thinking that this is a guy who has been perhaps ducking some of the better opposition out there? The other day in a press conference with us, he said he's now thinking more seriously, for example, of moving up to 175 pounds, light heavyweight, faster than he thought he might have.
Well, you know, I detected during this press conference that he's rededicated himself to boxing. He knows what side his bread is buttered on now, and he's going to stick to boxing, and I think give a lot of tremendous performances.
What side his bread is caviared on, you mean? All right, Jim.
Well said, Larry. And now let's turn our